Hi everybody. Well, I tell you, I would much rather we'll just fix this camera a little bit so it's not so blown out. Let me turn around this way a little bit. I think it's still dark. Hold on. I'm sorry about this. There we go. It's a little bit better. So, you know, believe me, don't you wish, I know I do, that we'd be talking about the inspiration of the Olympics today, and we'll get back to that. But when the whole Rob Porter case came down, I thought, you know, I want to get into a discussion with you guys about the disparate personalities of people at work, at home. You know, I've often mentioned, and it's the most, you know, sort of absurd and egregious example is O.J. Simpson. When I worked at ABC Sports, O.J. Simpson was a colleague, and you know, I wasn't his best friend by any means, but I came across him every now and then, and I just can't tell you how joyful and charming and respectful of me and other women around he was. But does that mean that he was not sick? He wasn't an absolutely pathologically off the rails angry guy, a jealous and commanding of his wife, and that he eventually took her life and Ron Goldman's. So that's the extreme. The coach who abused me all through sexually through my young years as a swimmer was the most charismatic guy you would ever meet. Everybody who came across that guy, you know, loved him. They'd slap him on the back, tell jokes with him, and he was a sicko. So now we come across the Rob Porter case, and you know, two former wives and a former girlfriend have very similar MO stories of this guy at the White House. He seems to be polite and grounded and under control and, you know, show nothing of a deviant personality. And at home, he's angry, he's controlling, he's abusive, he's got an issue with women in general or the women close in his life. So how do we tell? And now that leads us to, even since we put up this announcement that we're going to have this talk today about personalities and how to detect them and how to you know, suss out who's different in different walks of life and who's to the point of being sick, pathological in other parts of their lives. The massacre happens yesterday in Florida. Now, we could point out to, you know, here's a case of a personality. This young man, he loses his mother, he's expelled from school, but there are not only, you know, little hints that he's off the rails, there are big signs with his actually speaking out, is actually writing out that this is the killer that he wants to be and yesterday became. So I want to hear from you as to how we, whether it's a case of domestic violence, you know, are you a next door neighbor whom your friend next door has befriended you and told you that, you know, she doesn't like it, her husband's pushed her down the stairs? And I'm not always picking on men against women, it's not always the case. You're that high school kid who's disgruntled and angry and feel that life's been unfair to you, and you know about it. Well, we're sort of getting into an area of needing a cultural shift, aren't we? We're sort of in an area where we need, before laws can change, before gun laws change, hallelujah, if that's ever going to happen, who needs these assault rifles? I just ask you over and over again. You know, I was trying to write today, and I know a lot of you are heated about the subject, but okay, you want to protect your home? Okay, you're a hunter. Fair enough. Shouldn't we have extraordinary vigilance in being able to purchase a gun, at least for a while, at least until we can make an attempt on not letting guns get into the wrong hands? Shouldn't you have to go, let's just arbitrarily say, a year, not just 2 minutes, to buy a gun of any kind. I'm not going to get into the discussion now of what's an assault rifle and, oh, a pistol can fire, as fast as an assault rifle if you know how to use it. I'm not a gun person. You can argue me under the table, I'm sure, about all that. I'm just saying, should anyone be able to, quicker than they can get a driver's license or a marriage license, walk in and pass a background check in a matter of a few minutes? What if it took a whole year and we looked at every email, we looked at every correspondence, we talked to every neighbor and every schoolmate, and before that kid could get that arsenal of guns? And now maybe he's just as angry, maybe he has to go get help, as he was starting to do evidently from a therapist, but he doesn't get that arsenal of guns. So I know I got a bunch of subjects swirling around here, and mainly it's to how do we detect. And someone wrote in today, I'm going to forget your name right now, sir, but I'm going to write you back later because you were right to take me to task. If we could lump the two types of assailants in the last few years, from Columbine to Newtown, Connecticut, to the Las Vegas massacre, to yesterday, to the nightclub in Orlando, we could say they were either terrorists or they were people who were mentally ill and derailed. But you're right when you call me out for not lumping those two groups together, okay? There are millions of mentally ill people. My brother was one, lived on the streets all his life, and he doesn't deserve to be lumped in with terrorists. So I retract that lumping, and I'm going to write you later to start a conversation and make a direct apology for saying that. But I guess the point I'm making here is, how do we recognize when someone is terribly disturbed and has access to guns? How do we know that your next door neighbor doesn't have a garage full of assault weapons and we know that he's angry, he's ranting against something in particular, he's going to blow up at any moment, and we should know he's got an arsenal of guns in his garage? All right, who wants to talk?
We have lots of voices here.
Gabby, that's Gabby. You all know Gabby. That's Gabby's voice.
So Janet Auti Carlisle says, totally agree. In my humble opinion, I believe that people have to know that their conversations and their perspectives can be viewed and spoken with an open manner without judgment. If that were to happen, perhaps we can start a conversation that's creating a safe space to be honest.
I like that, Janet. I think I've said this to you guys before, so forgive me if I'm repeating myself. But, when I was a kid, there weren't a lot of childhood abductions yet in this country. Now it's become a big thing. And it wasn't a big thing at that time to chat with a stranger. If you were walking down the street and some guy was coming your way, he likes kids, and he reached out to you and said, "Oh, I love your sneakers. Come let me take a look at those." Mothers weren't disturbed. Fathers weren't disturbed. It was like, people were much more in an open culture. And now that we're in the world of many a day childhood abductions, kids are taught. It's not a law. You're not told as a parent. You cannot be a parent unless at the hospital when the baby's born or whatever, you sign an affidavit that says you will never let your child talk to a stranger until he or she's 10 years old, whatever. It's not a law. But we have just adopted into our culture that kids are not fuzzy friendly with strangers. As soon as a stranger approaches them in the grocery store, at a public park, walking down the street, that kid runs. He knows, she knows, to get with their parent, get with their babysitter, whoever it is. Well, we're going to come to the point where we, the citizens, the citizen police, so to speak, need to watch out for our neighbors, our teachers, our the kids and the people in charge of our kids, and see if there's aberrant behavior, if there's hateful behavior. And it starts, Janet, with what you're talking about. Let's let everybody be open to start with. Let's let that sick kid in Florida, when he was so upset about many, many things, have a public place to voice that in his classroom, etc. Then some teacher can say, you have every right to be angry about losing your mother. I tell you what, let's get you talking with somebody. Let's get you into this group therapy where you'll meet other angry kids too. So I think it's a good point. We got to be open and listen, and we got to watch out for each other. We got to watch out and know what the heck our neighbors are doing.
That takes us into Marcia Bard says, there are those who call out for help. Problem is that people don't want to hear. Even if they reach out for help, there is so little there, and it comes with a cost that not all that many people can pay.
Yeah, well, you know, Janet and Marcia, you're getting on the side of let's help. And shouldn't we? I wish my brother had gotten more help. Let's help people who, you know, don't have every fair chance in life, or they think they don't, and help them toward getting to be a little more even keeled and going and finding some happiness, some contentment. Okay. But then also, you know, we're talking about right now with these mass shootings, we're talking about going to the other side where we haven't done the help yet, but we've got to recognize. You know, we've got to have our eyes open and our ears open, and not, you know, we shouldn't just shut our door and say, you know, that neighbor of mine, he goes on these rants. He's out in his backyard screaming about, you know, people in the Middle East. I'm just making it up. He's angry. I mean, the guy's going to pop one day. I know he is. Well, we shouldn't go in our house and lock our door and not go out and have everybody look out for that, including our local law enforcement.
Dina Rouse says, when will America stop blaming guns and start blaming themselves? Pay attention to your children and be involved in their lives. Know your child and take care of them. Too much abandonment going on at home. Too many moms and dads paying attention to their phones.
Yeah, well, Dina, you're right on there. And, you know, I guess I'm naive whenever I write these posts about gun control. As I said just earlier a few minutes ago, you know, I am far from a gun expert. I'm absolutely ignorant about guns. And so every time I write, you know, why should these people have assault rifles? Does it make sense that anybody can go out and get a military-style rifle, and then somebody who does know about guns writes me back and says, well, that gun in Florida actually yesterday, you can't technically call that an assault rifle. So I don't know if you can take a single fire pistol that will only click one bullet at a time, if you could do just as much damage if you know if you caught people unawares as you could with a gun that fires, you know, many rounds with one pull of the finger. But I think you're right. We don't think about the guns so much. We think about the people. And at least in terms of gun control versus gun advocacy, that's why I said today, I think he would be an absolute, we put him up on our shoulders and carry him around. We'd probably make a dollar bill with his face on it if Wayne LaPierre, the head of the NRA, stood up and said, I'll never stop fighting for guns. You know, we believe in the Second Amendment to protect ourselves and our homes. We believe in the right to bear arms. Okay, but right now we're in a dire situation in this country, and it's happening too often to too many innocent people, and it's everywhere. It goes from Aurora, Colorado to Las Vegas to Newtown to, I said this before, it goes all over the country. So, you know, I think the point is, shouldn't it be close to impossible to get a gun? If you get a gun, if you qualify for a gun, you have proven without a shadow of a doubt that you have total responsibility, that you are going to use that gun in all the civil responsible ways, you know, that we all expect. And somebody who's on the rails would never be able to get a gun.
Janet Audie Carlisle says, my best friend was murdered by her husband, a police officer. He was clearly somebody who had guns, and it worried all of us. Because of his occupation, we could not do anything about it. You raise a good point.
Yeah, well, you know, let's, you know, dig into that case. You know, if we knew the specifics, do we go back and now lots of family members, that cops, you know, young family members when he was a kid say, yeah, he had a problem with women, he had a problem with intimacy, he had a problem with control. He was just, you know, he was just angry and seething, and he was going to take it out on the person closest to him where he could, you know, maybe get away with it. I'm not saying he was going to get away with murder, but I bet you anything he was plenty abusive before that murder happened. I'm so very sorry that this happened in your family. But again, I bet you anything, and I'd like to ask you directly, were there all kinds of signs, or was this just the greatest guy in the world, never said a bad word about anybody, never looked at anybody sideways, and one day he just took his gun and he murdered his wife? Doubtful. Yeah?
Beth Carney Burlow says, teachers need to be more proactive. They have a responsibility to step up and call out the bullies, not just talk about it in the lunchroom with other teachers. Start punishing the bullies. This kid said while he was being bullied, his teachers stood by and did nothing.
You know, you're right. In some ways, you know, when I saw how prepared they were, like these kids, just like when I was a kid, you know, we did fire drills all the time. Well, now they do, you know, live shooting drills. And these kids at this school had been trained. They had heard that I think they just had a fire drill in the morning.
Earlier that morning.
The very morning. Yeah. And now when the shooting started, who knew? They thought that, okay, it's one of our live shooting drills. And they went into action. They knew to, you know, get in one room, lock the door, everybody get quiet, get together, turn off all their cell phones so that it would make no noise. And the guy would go down and maybe try that door. It wouldn't open. He figured nobody's in there. So, you know, we've come a long way in terms of teachers preparing their classes, you know, for gosh forbid this ever happens at our school. Now the bullying I can't speak to, and I'm sure that you know, there's a big range of how teachers and parents deal with bullying up and down and across our country. But you're right, you know, if a kid's being treated unfairly, being made to feel inferior. You know, a lot of the transgender kids, you know, talk about how they're treated at school, and you know, in certain areas that's come a long way, and kids are taught very young that all individuals be respected. We're all different. Everybody under the blue sky should be respected. But clearly, you know, we are 320 some million people in this country, and you know, we don't have necessarily policies that are working for bullies and against bullies, you know, put into place everywhere. Thank you for writing in.
Janet Auntie Carlisle wrote back regarding her best friend.
Yeah, Janet.
She wrote back, yes to all of that.
Yes.
We all knew.
Yeah, yes to all of that. You know, it's a sort of minor point, but you know, the Bill Cosby case, I don't say it's a minor point, but compared to, you know, kids being shot and murdered, and your sister being murdered by her husband. Best friend, excuse me. The Bill Cosby case, you know, in the beginning it was like, no, not our country's grandfather of television, Bill Cosby, not the talented comedian who was so charming and we just loved his je ne sais quoi and his cardigan sweater, not Bill Cosby. And then, slowly but surely, everybody was like, well, but he was always a little creepy, you know, at those production meetings. He was always had a little kind of creepy thing to say about some woman at the meeting. And so in what we might call never call rape minor, but I'm just saying compared to murder, in almost all the cases of people who do go off the rails, we all sit around afterwards and said, you know, there was every sign. There was every sign. So as I said before, I think we're coming up to a cultural change to when we recognize these signs, we talk about them more. We go to that wife who we think might be being harmed next door. Then we say, I know it's none of my business. I'm just saying I'm afraid for you, and I don't want you to, you know, be hurt 2 or 3 or 5 years down the line. You know, let's start talking about this in a public way now. Let's get this husband of yours under control now instead of after it's too late for you.
Here's an opposing viewpoint from Brian Holland. He wrote in 2 different times, so I'll paraphrase the first one. He says, he's an avid gun enthusiast and he enjoys semi-automatic weapons. He has respect for life, and he's one of those guys that feels bad about hitting a frog with his car, but he doesn't want to see his pastime taken away from him.
Okay.
And he had access to guns throughout his childhood and was also bullied profusely throughout his childhood. It never once occurred to me to end a life. It probably has something to do with the fact that I was raised to understand that this life is all we have and that we all have a right to keep it. Life isn't something to be taken because it's never someone else's to take. It was simple, so I thought, ingrained in fact that it's part of my soul. Perhaps proper parenting, like that of my own parents, is needed to combat this.
Brian, that's so darn poetic. Now you are a gun advocate, a gun owner, a gun user, whom I could respect. You know, everything you say, from your childhood to, you know, your love of life, and it's something in your life that you honor and that you find enjoyment in. But I ask you, would it offend you if there were new gun purchase qualifications? Would it offend you that even though you're an upstanding citizen and you would never, as you say, hurt a frog, much less a human being? Would it offend you if we had new regulations, let's just say arbitrarily for the next 10 years, and if you wanted to go buy a gun, even though you already own guns, if you wanted to go buy a new gun, any kind of gun, you were put through the ringer. You had to wait for 6 months to a year. You had to show, you know, all the emails that you've sent. You have to, you know, show this and that. You had to have people stand up for you. You had to, you know, prove what an upstanding guy you are. Would that offend you? I'm just curious. So right back while we're still on this conversation for the next few minutes, because, you know, clearly what we're trying to say is that kind of vigilance would weed out a number of the gun purchases that should not be happening, that have happened. I mean, how many? What kind of arsenal did that guy in Las Vegas have? How did he get all those big, heavy artillery guns? So I want to know if somebody like you would be okay with a new standard of vigilance in gun purchase so that we can weed out the few who aren't like you. That's what I want to know.
It's interesting because Marie Payout just wrote back, but the problem is that not everybody thinks this way. The problem is other people get mad and use them. Kids in America deserve to be safe at school.
Yeah, they do, and you're right. Not everybody thinks this way. I mean, aren't we on a fence in almost every single issue in America today? You know, what's the history in America of when we've been quite this divided across all these party lines? And unfortunately, you wouldn't think that kids dying at a high school would be a party issue, but let's get down to the bottom of it, the funding of the NRA. Let's get down to the political issue of what your constituents think. But that's why I write, and I say again, I'm sure it's just, you know, categorically naive for me to, you know, ask Mr. LaPierre, the head of the NRA, to stand up and say, don't get me wrong, I'm going to be a gun advocate till the day I die. But we're willing, Brian Holland and I are willing to make it the toughest thing you can do in this society is to get a gun. You got to prove yourself over and up and down and over and out so that we can weed out the few who have it. I agree. Not everybody agrees. I'm trying to say, come on over to the other side. Don't give up your guns. Just make it tough for everybody to get one. You know?
Brian says, in reply to Diana, new regulations that don't cost me monetarily or hurt my hobby wouldn't bother me at all. In fact, I take extra courses and classes to maintain safety with my pistol. I have 3 out of 4 Florida state firearms licenses, not because I need them, but because I respect everyone else around me enough to have them and to feel safe around me.
Now, Brian, as far as I'm concerned, you should be appointed in the state of Florida as somebody who's in charge of the new regulations of gun control. Here you're a person who doesn't want to get rid of them by any means. You know, you respect an individual who wants to have a gun, but you are willing to go to a new level of regulations. So, you know, to my mind, it's people like you. It's not people like me who don't like guns at all and wish we went to a British sort of, I mean, even the police in Britain don't carry guns. I'd like to be in a society like that, but I'm going to respect you for your hobby and this love of yours of guns and how they operate and what you do with them, and you do it all so safely. And I wish that it was you and Wayne LaPierre and a lot of gun advocates who would come together to say, we get it, we're never going to give up our guns, but we're going to do it differently, and we're going to be the leaders. We're going to have a new frontier of gun use and the ability to purchase guns in America. Brian, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Gloria Rodriguez says, I'd like to share something that I've been talking about. I've been able to walk into school campuses without any clearance. My child plays soccer, and I've been able to just walk in with no problems. Schools need to look at that. I've told school personnel that people have been walking in and out from other gates and they do nothing. Imagine if I were there to do damage. God forbid a crazy person was to walk in just as I've been able to.
Yeah, Gloria, well, you know, I'm not going to speak from an educated batch of research here, but I know that there are schools here in California, in New York City, where you go through just like an airport to get onto that, and we'll call it a campus, even though they're just elementary schools, junior high schools. You cannot enter the grounds of the school without going through, just as if you go into a large stadium these days, to a sporting event. That never used to be. You know, that you'd have to have a full-on search of everything you've got with you to make sure you have no weapon, etc. Well, schools are heading in that direction, and we could say, no, come on, we don't want that for our schools. We don't want kids to feel like they're scared. They go to school and they've got to go through an electronic scanner. Well, yeah, that's where we're heading. That's exactly where we're heading. I think we only got time. Brian, again, I thank you so much. It doesn't do me any good. Just like with, you know, with any issue in politics this day, I'm a left liberal. You know, I admit it, but that doesn't do me any good to only talk to people who feel and think exactly the way I do about every issue. And I certainly feel that way about guns. I need an education, and I'm here to learn from you, Brian, and your brothers and sisters who are gun advocates. And it does this conversation all the more good that you've been in it, Brian. Thank you very much. I only got time for a couple of more, but I thank you all. And, you know, we didn't even get to the whole Rob Porter. How do you recognize a guy who's, you know, just plain not nice and abusive at home and is just terrific out on the pool deck, or, you know, in the White House? So we'll do another one on that. But this issue and what happened yesterday in Florida is too egregious. So thanks, everybody, for your patience. We'll get that conversation going next time.
Brian wrote back that he's good friends with Don McCumber.
Oh!
And it was great to talk with you.
Yeah.
Candy DeCarlo says she lives in California and owns guns, and she has a California CCW permit. I support vigorous standards to getting a gun.
There you go. That's it. You know, I think that's going to be the bottom line. I think I'm going to stop arguing because of my ignorance about what kind of gun you should get. You know, we've just gone to the hilt about this is called semi-automatic, this is called automatic, this is called a war type weapon. This is not. You could do just as much damage with this one or that one. I'm going to bow out of that conversation and go only to what you just said. What's your name you just wrote in? Christy?
Candy DeCarlo.
Candy. I'm going to go to what you just said. Just more rigorous standards. You know, let's give it a try. What do you say? Let's see if we can't, you know, stop the next one. Thank you, everybody. Peace out. And I hope you're watching the Olympics. Bye.